Hi, I'm Jason Gore for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to look at the pinnacle of physical media playback, the Oppo 203 and Oppo 205.
Big shelf.
So any fans of home theater will probably, or at least serious fans, will be aware of the brand Oppo. They sort of came out of the gate with some of their DVD and Blu-ray players and just absolutely slayed some of the competition with these incredibly well-built, incredibly well-engineered designs. They became the standard go-to players for a number of people, reviewers, etc., just because they were rock solid. They did everything that they needed to do. Really, really exceptional software and hardware specifications, and just as the home theater thing grew, as shinydisc sort of took over, as different formats came in, they really set the benchmark for so many people. It was a shock to many of us, not surprising, but still shocking, if that makes any sense, when they decided many years ago to actually sort of step away. People have been searching for years for Oppo replacements. There's companies like Revon and a couple others that have taken many of the hardware components and sort of found new ways of doing it. But the fact of the matter is that you get these the Oppos in the day relatively straightforwardly. There was distribution channels all over the major centers around the world. It was just much easier to get. It's not like you could go to a Best Buy and buy one of these, but it certainly was not so challenging to get. Service was great, support was great, etc., etc. The way that Oppo works, again, many of you will know this who are potentially watching this, but those of you just searching out one of these one of these devices, and had heard how good they were, allegedly, they basically would normally do sort of two different models. One would be a almost a digital only version, where there was certainly some analog or audio components that were sort of taken into consideration. But for the most part, think of it as sort of as somebody who has a digital system where the Oppo is going to be connected via HDMI or coax or toslink into your system, and the other that would have a robust analog side, the sort of best of both worlds, the sort of more advanced version that goes back a number of series. I happen to have, I mean, I wasn't going to have three of them here. I happen to have a 105, which was their highest end Blu-ray player, Blu-ray only player, that had some really stunning specifications, had analog audio component, and I had it as my sort of backup Blu-ray player, basically. But not only Blu-ray, because this was fundamentally important about how the Oppo systems work. These truly were, for the most part, universal players. They would play DVD, CD, Blu-ray, and they would play SACD and DVD audio. You would basically make this the center of my physical disc, other than Laserdisc, and we have another video on this channel about the Laserdisc situation. But basically, for anything that I had that was CD-sized disc, it was being played through the Oppo until 4K came out. And it was very exciting when the 4K model came out. The 203 came out first, which is the one on the bottom here. This 203 has the same robustness as their Blu-ray players, but obviously played 4K. And this was essentially going to be my, forever 4K player. We always have these silliness. And the thought at the time, the 203 came out well before the 205 came out, which is the one on top. We thought inevitably there probably would be the equivalent of 3 of 5, just like there was a 103 and a 105. This is the 203 and the 205. We assumed at some point in time a 205 would come out. But I was well aware that the vast majority of my listening, if not the entirety of my listening, at the time on my setup was through digital means. It was through my Marantz digital setup. It was going to be plugged in via HDMI. And while there's certainly some elements such as the way that it handles the power supply and all kinds of stuff that you get in the more robust model, nonetheless, it was that the 203 was going to be more than sufficient, and the price it was not the cheapest player, but it was not crazy expensive at the time. I picked that up the day that Oppo announced that they were pulling out of the market. I actually called the Canadian distributor to see if I could get a 205 at that point in time. I'm like, you know what? If they're getting out of the market, let's buy one. The 205 would be my main unit, and the 203 would be a backup. They did not. I could have bought a 203, a mint in box, as it were, 203, to have it back up there. I did not do it. It would have been about $500-600, and those run about $2,000 now. $1,500, $2,000 Canadian. Totally ridiculous, but not so ridiculous when you realize that, you know, literally money no object, you cannot get a player truly as spec'd out and performance wise and with the capabilities that these have at any price. These truly are the flagship players, and that's sort of where we're at. So yeah, I've been rocking the 203. Weirdly, it's my Panasonic UV9000 that does most of my heavy lifting for 4K itself. The way that it works with my projector is quite satisfying, and some of its color reproduction is a little bit better than the Oppo model. Despite the fact that it's years old and doesn't have firmware updates, there's very, very few discs that I've ever been able to play on this, including modern 4K discs, that have had any issues whatsoever. But since I'm a reviewer, I need to have sort of a spare player in the rack. So if something doesn't work on one, then it may work on the other. That's just the nature, almost always to do with copy protection more than anything else. Nonetheless, the 203, this guy on the bottom, was absolutely doing its thing for many, many years. And I saw the opportunity just over the last couple days when somebody listed for sale not only a 205, but a 205 that had been substantially upgraded. It is way, way, way more than I ever wanted to spend on a player, but this truly will become my go-to player. Also, and this is a slight complication, there are additional modes that you can actually get for playback of certain region discs and certain capabilities, such as playing back of different backup solutions that you can get with the Oppo that you simply can't get with other players. And so there's huge, huge advantages, just the way that my media library works, for me to be having one of these in the rack. Now, as you can see, just on the sort of physicality, there's the 203. I know it's a bit dark, but the 203 is here. Bigger chassis, bigger case than the 205. There's, you know, it's substantially more robust. If I lift this up a little bit, you'll be able to see there's cooling fans, etc. on the side. But really, it's where we look on the other side that things really come to the fore, and you can sort of get a better idea of the difference. Let's try to spin this around without too much drama here. And you can see here that the one on the bottom, this is the 203, essentially it does have analog video outs, component outs, as it were, you know, just normal IAC cable, etc. Multiple HDMI outputs and inputs. That's a whole nother conversation that we'll get into in a sec. But if you look at this guy, this big beast on the top, all kinds of nonsense. Obviously separate analog outs for multi-channel. I will never be using this, but nonetheless it's really nice that they're there. XLR outs to actually allow 2-channel audio. And again, number of other outputs. And the way that this has been upgraded, we'll crack it open in a moment and look at it. This has actually been, it came with very robust power supply, etc. But the person I bought it from has gone a step even further and spent many dollars actually upgrading the internals. So really this is a wonderfully hot-rodded version of a 205. It has the guts and the components of what makes the 205, plus linear power supply, etc. We'll get into that in a second. But just in terms of straight up functionality, if I sort of go through here, it's nice because the box actually comes with one of these that shows it off. The Oppo box actually has it. And so if we read it right, 4K, drawing from over a decade's worth of experience in advanced image processing, UV 205 supports 4K Ultra HD with native decoding and upscaling. I mean, it's just 4K, but also upscales other discs if you want. The high-precision HDMI audio clock, this dedicated high-precision clock regeneration circuit for HDMI audio-only output. So there's an HDMI audio-only on this specifically for high-resolution audio elements that completely bypasses some of the video feeds. Really fantastic. Exclusive design significantly improves audio performance for downstream HDMI device that rely on clock quality of an HDMI signal. USB DAC, and this actually serves as a USB asynchronous DAC. It has a USB input, so I could actually plug this in. I could put a laptop into here, and this becomes the actual DAC. With support for up to 768 kilohertz PCM and 22.5 megahertz DSD formats. Ridiculous. It's got a toroidal power supply. New design power supply provides superior power efficiency. Again, this one is a linear power supply, not connected to that toroid. It has the ESS 9038 Pro Saber DAC, so really stunning DACs. Even years later, these DACs are absolutely top notch. It has two of these DACs, one dedicated for the stereo output and the other for the 7.1 channel output. So interestingly, the stereo has its own dedicated DAC chip. It has HDMI input. So input port supports UHD resolution, is available to connect to an external streaming device. This input supports high-resolution audio, allowing this to be used as a multi-channel DAC via HDMI input. So if I wanted, I could plug, let's say, an Apple TV or something like that into this, or a laptop, into the HDMI in, and then all of these analog outputs, this would actually serve basically as the digital to analog converter, the DAC, and then we would actually have the output. That's really not what I use it for. Believe it or not, what I use the HDMI input on this for is because I only have so many HDMI inputs on my actual unit. I have my antenna plugged into here. Ridiculous, but that's absolutely what I do for those few times, usually during Super Bowl, when I'm actually running the antenna. And then this one, unlike the other, and you'll see on the front, this has a headphone amplifier. Built-in headphone amplifier taps directly into the audio signal from the DAC, providing an intimate listening experience with the best possible audio quality. So, Fio has a great deal of experience with their headphone options. Certainly, really fantastic things. But as you can see, as I sort of roll it around, headphone output on this guy, not on the one underneath. Yeah, so just look on the back here. There's actually this one's interesting. This actually has a ground. Both of them have RS-232. Both of them has USB 3, the optical coax, etc. So again, if I swing this sort of around the other side again and try to do this, you can see basically these boards are pretty much identical. The sort of main video component elements, and it's all of this stuff. It's all the analog stuff on the top that really makes a difference. This is much more of a beastly thing, but independent of its weight and stuff like that, that's truly its capability. In other words, it's a little bit more rock solid version of the 203. And because this will become essentially my dedicated player for most of my discs, be they CD, DVD audio, SACD. Certainly, I've been using this for regular Blu-rays where I don't need the notions of the 9000, and it's allowing me, when I switch back and forth between these two players, to sort of allow one to get a little less wear and tear than the other. These are so wonderfully built that I really do expect decades of experience with this. Now, what we're going to do is crack this open, and I'm going to see how much I can actually see on the inside. I'm going to pull up the my little DJI camera and see what we can see on the inside and see what may have been upgraded in here. And then we will come back and sort of wrap everything up. So as I look in the back here, you can actually see, I mean, very similar here. Both of them have obviously gigabit LAN. They have the HDMI out main, the HDMI out audio only, the HDMI in port, the optical coax, so Toslink and coax, the two USB 3s, the RS-232s, the trigger ports. And then you have the IR back here. You can see that there's a ground on the 205, which is interesting. There's an added ground element here. And then there's, again, the IR blaster change. On the back of the 203, we have this multi-channel analog out, if you wish. Obviously, it is there, and really quite excellent that it is included here. The analog out that you can see is actually nice that it's included here. Simply a little bit better on the 205. So the 203 absolutely could have been a perfectly fine analog capable of device using its internal DAC, etc. Or simply used as a DAC and then out using 2-channel here, or obviously HDMI. What do we get when we actually go to the 205? Well, you can see the analog board is a completely separate board now on the top along here. So now we have this dedicated stereo out using its own individual ESS Pro DAC, balanced as well as stereo output. I unfortunately don't have enough XLR inputs as much as I would want to use XLR, but I'm probably going to end up using the RCA outs. And then again, we have the optical and the coax out, as well as this USB DAC option. This is the big addition so that you can actually plug a device directly in and actually use this entire unit as a full-on USB DAC. I'm unlikely to ever use it, but it's nice that it's there. And then along the top, you can see we have front right, front left, surround right, left, subwoofer center, surround back right and back left. So full multi-channel capabilities on there. The input is just a normal regular IEC. And yeah, that's how, if you sort of step back and look at the way that these operate, pretty much identical to the way that one would expect. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take the lid off this. We'll take a look inside, and then after we've done that and put the lid back on, we're going to actually take a look at inside the 203 just to see the difference. Here's the big, beefy Oppo toroidal power supply. Really substantial analog board here. I'm not going to bother taking it off. Buried underneath here, underneath this sort of metal plate, is the revised power supply. I'll put a photo on the screen of what that actually looks like. Here's the main drive, this BDL 1601 drive mechanism. This is the big Oppo drive. You can see that some of these big beefy caps that we actually have here on this element. This is the 2-channel analog board with, yeah, substantially improved DACs, a bunch of transistors, etc. Underneath all of this is like incredibly well engineered. And some of these modifications have actually been made in order. It's a little bit dusty because this is a little bit more open concept than the 203, but just as a rough look at what's inside here, that's what we actually have inside the 205. So one thing to start, obviously the 203 is substantially lighter, much lighter than the other one. It doesn't have that giant chunk of copper, the toroid. But also the top has no vents. There's no ventilation. There is some around the back for cooling here, but there's actually no top vent. So I actually had this on the bottom of the rack. The other one will go on the top. If I open this up here carefully, see if I can slide this out. Top comes off. Again, it's got the same, very similar construction. It has these little feet. That's what actually locks into the inside. And yeah, I think this one I can actually hold up and you get a much better idea. So similar, exactly the same drive mechanism. So the 1601 BDL looks a lot cleaner because it doesn't have as much dust actually going on the top. But yeah, so the same drive mechanism, identical. What's nice about this is, God forbid, if the 205 drive dies, I have a spare in my 203, which is going to be much less substantially used. And yeah, much less sort of robust construction inside, a much more digital fronted element. You know, you have normal power supply elements here. Here's the board with some of the analog components, much less robust than we actually saw on the other one. The chip here with the cooling and all that element, and then a lot more empty space inside, which is great. It's very efficient. This is basically all you actually need in order to get a really rock solid digital player. We obviously have a little bit more nonsense inside the other unit. It's crazily engineered with all these multi-layers of all these other boards. That's why I'm not taking the 205 apart directly. I can actually link to another video, the sort of takedown video that actually shows every single element actually being pulled across here. I'll have a link to that in the description. But that's the inside of the 203. So just, you know, in terms of lifting up the hood and seeing, quote unquote, what the engine looks like, you can see the dramatic engineering differences between the 105, sorry, excuse me, the 205 and the 203 and how they all come together. So that's our look at the inside of the 205. This my new beast, my new reference player. Certainly for audio playback, I look forward to actually hooking this up into my system, having some firmware update fun, and sort of going from there. I think this, strangely, despite the fact that it was not inexpensive, is a true investment. As physical media continues to be produced, but as new physical media devices are simply not being invested on by even high-end manufacturers, those trying to make a partial Oppo, something almost as good as an Oppo, we're just not seeing things that sort of reach this level. Every time that a CES comes along, I keep hoping that some manufacturers are actually going to decide this is what we're going to do. And the issue is when these become more and more esoteric, when it's manufacturers that are more and more obscure, when it comes to support updates, all of that sort of stuff becomes even more challenging. The fact that Sony's getting out of disc players other than for their consoles, etc., is like, slightly depressing for those of us that actually really love physical media. There are huge advantages, obviously, for streaming services, for audio and for video, but there's still many, many, many titles that are only available direct, and the quality and the caliber of actually reproduction is just so substantially better. The best streaming, the best possible 4K streaming doesn't come touch a candle to the kind of stuff that you get from 4K playback, and the same can be said for audio. Yes, certain streaming services can actually do certain levels of high resolution audio, but I still am finding substantially better elements that I can get, be it Blu-ray audio with its Atmos mixes or SACD or DVD audio, all from one unit. So that's our look at the Oppo. The 203 is going to go as a sort of backup. It'll go onto my other setup upstairs. The 205 will be my main unit here under the 9000, and I look forward to many, many years celebrating this, the king of all physical media players. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of these beastly things. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.